Welcome back, everyone, to the Reading by Candlelight Book Club at Molly's Cottage. I'm here with Emily Paull, debut author of The Distance Between Dreams, which features in the December historical fiction book box. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Now, readers, if this is your first time meeting Emily, here's a little background. Emily Paull is a West Australian librarian, author, and book reviewer who once worked in bookselling. And as we keep mentioning on the podcast, librarians and booksellers are the best people. Yeah. Emily is a big supporter of the WA writing community and regularly moderates author interviews around Perth. In 2019, her debut collection of short fiction, Well Behaved Women, was published. Her novel, The Distance Between Dreams, was shortlisted for the 2023 Fogarty Literary Award and was published by Fremantle Press in April this year. Emily has also been shortlisted for the John Marsden and Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers. And for listeners who haven't read it yet, Emily, can you please give us a spoiler-free pitch for The Distance Between Dreams?
Oh, I'll do my best. For people who do know me in person, I'm a bit notorious for accidentally giving spoilers to things, but hopefully not my own book. So The Distance Between Dreams, I'll hold it up for anyone who's watching live. It is a historical fiction love story, sort of. It's a wrong side of the tracks love story with a twist, is how I like to describe it. It's about a young man called Winston Keller from a working class background and a young woman called Sarah Willis, who's from a little bit more of an affluent background, who meet in 1939 at a party and fall instantly in love. But it turns out to be a little bit of family history between the two fathers, so Winston's dad and Sarah's dad, and that threatens to tear them apart. And then when World War II begins, that pulls them even further apart. So the question starts off as can they find their way back to one another, but it evolves a little bit more into can they ever get past their first love if they can't find their way back to one another? I'll leave
Yeah,
that up to readers to find out which question gets answered first.
that's an excellent summing up of it. Now, I want to know, do you read your Goodreads reviews?
Ooh, only if I'm feeling really masochistic because Goodreads reviews are not for authors, and a lot of people on Goodreads are writing reviews for their own reasons, whether it be because they've been sent copies by publishers to review, or it's a way that they personally track their reading. And so that whole spectrum of reasons why people are on Goodreads means that you get a whole spectrum of responses, whether that be this is not the book that I expected, 2 stars, or whether it's, they really go into the nitty-gritty of why they didn't like it. So I've tried really hard not to read my Goodreads reviews. I did do it once, probably about 3 weeks after the book came out, when I was feeling a little bit like I'd come down from a high after the launch, and I realized that was kind of the peak of the launch. So I was feeling a little bit down in the dumps, and I thought, let's make it worse. Let's go on Goodreads. And luckily, there wasn't anything too awful on there, but it had only been 3 weeks, and I haven't checked since. So who knows? Maybe there's something terrible on there now.
No, not at all. I checked today.
Oh,
The, ra-
okay.
the rating for your book is excellent.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you.
And many of the reviewers couldn't believe that this was a debut novel, and neither could I. It was excellent. Now, but what I understand is this book began a long time ago when you were still in high school, which is amazing because considering you're only 17 years of age when you started, which is a baby to me anyway. Um, now, what was the moment that first sparked this story for you?
Oh gosh, well, just for context, 17 is half my life ago. I'm 34, almost 35 now. So it was a very, very long process. So I may get some of the details slightly wrong about the beginning of the project because, memory becomes kind of mythologized as we go
Yes,
on.
it gives writers great hope.
Yes, it does. Well, it's a story of persistence, isn't it? Because Fremantle Press had rejected it a few times as well before they finally picked it up. And I had obviously improved it enough to get it over the line. But, sometimes you can turn a no into a yes with hard work. But I had this thought in my head that I began writing it on Anzac Day in 2008. So I was in year 12. I was studying, among other things, Australian history, Japanese language, and drama. So you'll see threads of all of those things in the book. There's quite a lot of Shakespeare references and things like that. And I was also doing English literature. So reading and writing, big passion of mine. I'd been trying to write a novel for a while. And I really like this idea. I think I got it from Natasha Lester about the way that you kind of collect different things. You're like a bowerbird, and then something is the catalyst that suddenly you realize why all of these interesting things interest you, and you realize what the shape of the story is going to be. So part of it for me was we did an excursion to the WA Army Museum, which is on Burt Street in Fremantle, where they have all of these amazing life-size dioramas of camp life on the Burma Railway. So that was one part. And another part was my family took a trip to Japan, and I had found this band called Search Rescue through MySpace. I don't know if anybody knows MySpace, but you used to be able to have playlists on your profile. So I'd found this band. They were an American band called Search Rescue, and they had an album called The Compound that I liked listening to. So when we went to Japan, I traipsed through 3 or 4 record shops with my either my mum or my dad or both of them and my siblings in tow to try and find a copy of this album. Eventually found one. And when we came home, I was listening to it. I suddenly got this idea that maybe the tracks were telling a story. So
Oh.
yeah, that was sort of my rough outline to start with. But then I threw that outline completely out the window as soon as I started writing because the characters had their own ideas. So yeah, it's so hard to remember like what order things happened in as well, and whether there was more to it than that. But yeah, it's been a long process.
It's still a great origin story, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's nice to have an origin story. That's what superheroes have, isn't it?
But in the center of the novel is the love
Mm,
story of Sarah and Winston.
yeah.
And like you said, they're two young people from very different worlds during the Second World War in Australia. But
Mm.
what I want to know is there a real life inspiration behind Sarah and Winston? Or are they just completely from your
Ooh.
imagination?
I think completely from my imagination. There's probably like parts of people I know that have inspired certain traits of them. I mean, you know, no character is 100% the author, but then both characters will have parts of me in them as well. So, Sarah in particular was a really hard character to get right because she's kind of too much in lots of different ways. You know, she always says the first thing that comes to mind. She's kind of opinionated and, you know, well, why not? Why can't I do that kind of person? And I think I can really relate to that whole feeling like you're too much for everyone around you and having to just keep being who you are, but being very worried in the background that people are going to push you away because of it. So she comes a little bit from that side of me, I think. And I think, I don't know, there's probably parts of me in Winston too, but being the male main character, he was somebody maybe that I based more on people around me. So I think I put some physical attributes of my grandfather's in there. So I think at one point I talk about he's got like kind of big ears and a big nose, and that was kind of a loving tribute to the kind of physical attributes that one of my grandfathers had, and you know, things from people I know and family members, friends, just things I like about the people that I know, but almost in a less conscious way. It's not a thing where I've gone, I'll borrow this from this person and I'll borrow that from that person. It's just when you start writing a character, I don't know, it's almost instinct. I don't
Yeah.
even know if that makes sense, but
Yes, it does. No, it does. And I love how feisty Sarah is and what a dreamer Winston is. They're
mm.
just a beautiful couple. But I've visited Fremantle many times. I love its history and its proximity to the coast. What drew you to using Fremantle as the setting for the story?
Um, it was a place I used to spend quite a lot of time as a teenager. It would be one of those things where you know, on a beautiful sunny weekend like we've just had here in Perth, you might get your parent or one of your friends' parents to drive a carload of you down to Fremantle, and you'd get dropped off sort of near the town hall and then spend half the day wandering around the markets, going to like the cafes and things like that, hanging out at the Roundhouse. It was just a place I really enjoyed going as a teenager. But the thing I really like about Fremantle is the way that at the street level, a lot of it is quite modern, but if you look up sort of the first floor and above, the historical facades and a lot of the buildings are still there, and they have a lot of plaques very proudly telling the histories of the place. And they have all the heritage listed sites, like the Roundhouse and a couple of the older homes and things like that, and the prison. And so it's a place where you can walk around and imagine what it was like 100 years ago, 80 years ago. So it's kind of fertile ground for somebody who's a bit of a history nerd like me. And then discovering that it had played such a key role in the Second World War was a bit of a gift as a writer. You know, I'd already decided I was going to set the book in Fremantle, mostly I think because it seemed like a place that was interesting enough to write about on a kind of whole of Australia scale. Because I grew up in the suburbs. So, you know, first of all, I couldn't have set a book in Winthrop where I grew up because it didn't exist until the mid 80s. It was a pine plantation or something like that. But also, if you talk to someone from the other side of Australia and you say Fremantle, they might not know that enough about it to picture it, but they know that it's a port city or they'll know of it. They'll go, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. So, yeah, it was started with that and then had lots of amazing historical things to be found after.
Yes, because it's quite a significant port in World War Two, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was the largest Allied naval port in the Southern Hemisphere during the Second World War. It was the second largest Allied naval port in the world, and the largest one was Pearl Harbor. So after December 1941, it was kind of a major naval base, and we had from March 1942 hundreds of American, Dutch, and British naval personnel and submariners based in Fremantle. So there's now the Maritime Museum there, and you can go onto the submarine that they have. Although I think at the moment it's closed. It's like HMS Ovens or something like that that you can go onto, but it's closed for maintenance. So you have to do a virtual tour at the moment. But that's where the actual submarine base was. And they had hundreds of major naval activities going on based out of Fremantle. So it made things a little bit exciting because suddenly things were happening, but it also made Fremantle a bit more of a target. So people might have felt safer and more at risk at the same time, particularly because, you know, we know that the Japanese bombed Darwin. We know that at one point a midget submarine got into the harbour at Sydney. I think Newcastle got bombed at one point by a
Hmm.
submarine. So it was a very real possibility for the people of Fremantle that, oh, okay, this base is here. Something bad could happen because this base is here. So yes, we've got all these military people who will try and stop it, but maybe they wouldn't have come here in the first place if they weren't here. In theory, the base was a secret, but I just don't see how it could possibly have been a secret when suddenly there's all these men in uniform walking around, and ordinary Australian families are being encouraged to show them hospitality and bring them home for a meal. And the girls are being told, you know, take them out on Friday night. They're all homesick. They're far away from home. They're doing us a big service by being here and helping defend us. So I just find that hilarious that it was a secret base. I wish I could almost go back in time and be a fly on the wall and see how secret it really was.
Yeah, probably not very
No.
secret at all. Now, what's the favorite? The thing about historical fiction is that
Mm.
it, I love reading historical fiction. I would never write it because I'm just too lazy. Um, because the amount of research you must have to do to make such a beautiful, wonderful story on the page. What's your favorite part of the research process?
Oh, I mean, you say that you couldn't write historical fiction because you're lazy, but I recently attended the History Unbound festival that the Historical Novel Society put on at the Parramatta Town Hall. I didn't go in person. I attended online because it's a bit expensive to just fly over for a conference on a
Yes.
whim, but I felt very uh, validated because there was another writer and the who it was is escaping me just for the moment, but there was another writer who said they researched the way that I do, and that is kind of by doing it backwards. So
Oh,
I have like a solid enough understanding of my historical period from reading things and watching things and having studied history both at high school and then at uni for my undergraduate degree. And I get the story out first. And then I go back and start doing a lot more of the research. So
oh,
there might be bits where I'm writing and I go, oh, I actually don't know if that's possible, so I need to go and research. And then you
Hmm.
get on Trove, which is the most wonderful resource ever, where you um, can look up newspaper articles and advertising and have a look at, what movies were showing at that particular time, which was pretty key for this book. But I tend to not do a lot of the really heavy research stuff until I have the bones of the story down. And then it's kind of filling in the gaps. It does mean that sometimes you get to somewhere in your research where you go, oh, cool, well, that whole plot arc is not possible, or that timeline is stuffed up. And I'm doing the timeline for the next project I'm working on now, again, at the end of the process, and discovering, for example, that I had January 1915 happen, and then the Prime Minister announced the start of the First World War. So it was like back in time to August 1914. So you find all of these little things where kind of being a pantser just really doesn't work for being a historical fiction writer, but I don't know any other way to be. But I think the thing I really like in the research, that being said, is where I have a kind of an inkling about, I think that this thing and this thing are connected. And then you go and you do the research and you start to find these little clues that indicate that, yeah, you're on the right path. And it's that whole idea that, the way that I see history and the things that I've picked up through my reading are leading me down the right path. I find that really kind of almost magical, almost like I've been channeling something. And then I also really love when you go down what my writers group calls a rabbit hole, where you find a little nugget of something interesting, and then the next thing you know, you've got enough notes to do another whole book because it's completely not relevant to what you're working on, but it's so fascinating what you've discovered. I think that's definitely why I've got 3 or 4 books in mind. And all these screenshots on my phone, I was going through my screenshots before we started recording, going, oh, yeah, that's for that book and that's for that project. And yeah, I think I've got enough material for the next 3 books, so I just need the time to write them.
It sounds fascinating. And especially, I understand what you mean about the fact
Mm,
that, you can use the same research for different stories because the history doesn't change. It's still the same. It's just the stories change. And that's up to you as the author to create those stories.
mm. Yeah, for sure. And it's all connected as well. So a
Hmm.
lot of the research that I did for the backstory part of The Distance Between Dreams is First World War, and now I'm writing First World War, and so that was kind of the backbone for that. So it's kind of cool that I'm filling in the bits of the map.
Yes. Now, was there anything that surprised you about Western Australia's war effort that helped shape your story?
Ooh, I mean, I think the submarine base was probably the biggest thing. Um, I don't know. Nothing's really springing to mind. And I think this is one of the great paradoxes of promoting a book is that, this book came out in April. And so I did a couple of months of events and things. And then my head has been solidly in a different book.
Too, yes.
So you have to go like, which book is that from, that particular thing? There was one very significant error that I made early on in the drafts where we've got Nick, the American character who you meet in part 3 of the book, and Sarah. And Nick is teaching Sarah how to drive in an army vehicle that he's borrowed from a friend. And my grandfather read a really early draft of the book and read that and just like crossed out the whole scene and was like, you can't have that because that would have been stealing petrol from the army. So there was a lot of stuff about like the rationing. So that at the moment, I'm finding a lot of stuff about like paper rationing and, what foods they could and couldn't get and blackout curtains and what you could and couldn't get fined for and things like that. It's the sort of everyday details that are the things that you don't think about, but really give a sense of the period that you're writing about. And they're just so important because if you get them wrong, somebody's going to notice.
Yeah.
I did have somebody at one of my events, I think it was at Mandra, very early on, Sarah talks about Winston's outfit and she says, oh, I like your costume. Are you supposed to be a chimney sweep? I like the suspenders though. And this lady came up to me and she said, I really liked it. But I'm a teacher, so I just have to point this out. In Australia, we wouldn't have said suspenders, we would have said braces. And I went, oh, okay. Yep. That's probably true. Modern readers might think braces on your teeth, but yes, technically that would be accurate. Got through all the rounds of editing, and then this lady at Mandra pointed it out, and she was absolutely spot on.
It's funny too about the rationing because I have my grandma's ration books from World War Two.
Oh,
And a
wow.
lot of people don't realize that we rationed food here in Australia, and there were certain things that you could not get,
Mm,
including including silk to have a wedding dress, or
yeah,
yeah, or even just like I mean, her coupons were the ones that I've got are for butter and
yeah.
for clothing and things like that, and meat,
And
like.
tea and
Oh yeah,
sugar.
tea and sugar. The
Yeah.
sugar was just in, yeah. And it's just, I just find it that whole time absolutely fascinating. And I love
Mm,
it when you read about it and you just think, my goodness, the lives that they led at that time
yeah,
are so different from our own.
absolutely. And the rationing didn't just stop when the war
No.
stopped, too. It went for, I think, a couple of years after. Yeah.
Now, you're a librarian, as I said, you were an interviewer and a former bookseller.
Yes.
How has your present and past careers influenced your writing? You must have read a lot of books.
Yeah, I mean the bookshelves behind me are pretty full, but I think quite a lot of those would be unread. Anybody that reads my Substack would know that I'm currently on a mission to get my TBR, my to be read number down, and I am not going to publicly admit what the number is on the internet because it's a large number and it's kind of embarrassing, but also like we don't shame people for their reading habits. No. It's kind of like having a wine cellar. It's not there to drink it all as fast as possible. It's there so that you have the right book at the right time. I got that analogy from my friend Jess, so thank you, Jess.
That's an excellent analogy.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a really good analogy. So any mood I might be in for the next, 40 years, I think I'm sorted. I think the thing about my bookish hats that I wear is it's kind of like that whole thing in the Barbie movie where Ken says his job is just beach. And there's
Mhm.
those shirts you can buy that say my job is just books. I think that's pretty accurate for me because if it's something bookish related, I'll put my hand up to do it. So I got into book selling pretty much straight out of my uni degree. My first uni degree was an undergraduate Bachelor of Arts in English and Creative Writing and History, double major. And I went straight from there into book selling, and I was working 4 days a week, deciding what books to put in the shop and recommending them to people. And I kind of developed what I like to think of as my superpower, which is I'm really good at finding somebody a book that they will like. Or if somebody says to me, I can't remember what the title is, but it's blue and it had a dog in it. Often I can work out what the book is. I've got really, really good at that game. Maybe not so much now because with the library, the stock is a little bit more ever changing and it's not limited to like a 3 to 6 month window the way that it was in book selling. But I got a really good idea of like how different aspects of the book industry work. And I used to go up to the spot on the shelf where my book would sit and just be like, keep working because that's the spot there between that author and that author. That's where your book would go. So it was kind of very motivating to be in there every day and talking to other people who loved books and meeting lots of authors. And then I got to do interviews, so I got to talk a lot more about craft, which I'm sure you've had this experience as well. Like the more you talk about craft with people who really get it, the more momentum that can kind of help you build up, and people might give you different ideas of approaches to try, and it helps you when you're stuck and all of that sort of thing. Pivoting into libraries, I was book selling at a bookshop that specializes in selling directly to libraries and did all of the shelf ready services and things. And my role was to specifically go to libraries, talk to librarians who did collections work, and make sure that their needs were getting met. And the more I got to meet with these librarians, the more I was remembering how much I love libraries and how great librarians are and how important the school library in particular had
Oh,
been to me, like in primary school. And so I thought, you know what, I actually would really like to do this. And I applied for a job in a library when it came up. And then when the opportunity came up to go and study to get my qualifications as a librarian, I went and did that. So that was sort of end of 2017, I applied for that. And by 2021, I was qualified. So I'm now working as a librarian in the library that I used to go to as a kid. And
That's a,
I get to interview authors and meet lots of readers and use that superpower to help people find the books that they need without any of the pressure of having to meet sales targets and worry about the climate of book selling in Australia versus Amazon and things like that, because that can be pretty anxiety inducing. It does mean that I know maybe a little bit too much about the business side of selling books, which does make things a little bit fraught when you go to sell your own book and you know just how hard it is when you're competing with all of the big blockbuster American and UK titles on the shelves. But in some ways, that's also been a blessing because you don't necessarily default to I'm a massive failure when you go, no, no, it's actually just really hard to sell books. So selling any is great.
it is,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, without giving anything away, part of the novel describes the horrifying conditions of prisoners of war who were forced to clear the jungle so that the Thai Burma Railway could be built.
Yeah.
Now, were these descriptions the biggest challenge of writing this story?
Uh, in a way, yes. Originally, I wanted to completely gloss over Winston's war experience. I wanted to kind of have their parting and then, in summary, almost have, he's been away for a while. This is what's been going on at home. And you almost would skip part four of the book and go straight to part five and have what happens after.
Mhm.
But I then realized I just couldn't do that because it was such a harrowing chapter of history and the number of Australians killed on the Thai Burma Railway and the stories that people very bravely then came home and found a way to tell their families or to write down for others. I felt like I had to do it justice if I was going to do it,
I
or I had to
understand.
just not do it at all. And so I I had done kind of a bare bones sketch of it, still very young, didn't really know what I was doing, sort of a baby author. And then The Narrow Road to the Deep North came out, which is, the book about the Thai Burma Railway based on Richard Flanagan's father's experience in one of those camps. And I kind of like hate read it at first because I was so disappointed that somebody with as big a profile as Richard Flanagan had written about this thing, being like, this was going to be my hook, and he's stolen it. And I read it and I loved it. Yeah, exactly. Like the idea that Richard Flanagan would be even aware of what I was writing is just ridiculous.
And then
But
he won the
yeah,
Booker
then he
Prize
won the
for
book
it.
Oscar. But I can't be mad because it's such an amazing book. And I thought, no, I have to do another pass at this because what I've done is just cursory, insulting, like lazy. I have to go back and do it again. And I read all of these amazing biographies, and I'm fairly certain that Richard Flanagan must have read some of the same biographies because I was reading his novel and there were a couple of anecdotes that were so similar that either his father must have been in the same camp as the person who'd written this particular biography, or Richard Flanagan must have read it as well. And so that kind of thing was like, oh, you're on the right track. You're reading
Yeah.
the right books. Um, and there's been kind of weird parallels with my book and his book too, because my book came out on the 1st of April, and I think it was like the 6th of April, the TV adaptation came out. And so that was kind of spooky timing in a way. But I'm so glad that I did take the time to try and get the emotional truth of that part right, because I have spoken to so many people since who have said, I had a family member who was there, or, my great uncle died there, or um, have just shared personal family stories. And I think it's a great honor to have made a connection with someone that way and to have done my best to do that chapter of history justice and to try and do it in a way that recognizes that war is complicated and it's way more complicated than just us versus them and goodies and baddies, and but that there were still atrocities occurring, probably
Yeah.
on
Well,
both sides.
I'm glad that you went back and that you
Yeah,
did that because that's my favorite part of the book.
I get that a lot. So yeah, I'm glad I went back too.
Now, you're a passionate supporter of the WA community, writing community. What does the community mean to you?
Oh gosh. I mean, people have this idea that when you're a writer, you're like writing in a garret all by yourself and you don't need anybody, or you're in a cafe writing by yourself and it's all very like picturesque and you have all of these interesting thoughts, but it can be really lonely sometimes. And only another writer understands how tough it can be mentally as well, I think. So connecting with other writers has just been so important both pre and post publication. In the pre-publication sense, it's that whole idea of like having a cheer squad and having people to bounce ideas off, and someone who reads your work who really gets the story mechanics side of things. And it's having friends is one thing, and I love my friends whether they're writers or not, but having writer friends I think is really important, because if I say to my friends who don't write, oh, I'm really struggling with, really struggling with the fact that I didn't get any reviews, and they'll kind of go, oh well, yeah, that's annoying, but that might not mean the same thing to them. And yeah, it's just so important having people who understand.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference. Now,
Yeah.
amazing authors have written wonderful endorsements of your book. Natasha Lester said that your book sparkles. Sasha Wolseley called it heartstorming, and Louise Allen said it's beguiling. What is it like to have these amazing historical fiction writers talk about your book in this way?
I mean, I'm even more stunned that those three wonderful women, I'm lucky enough to call them friend. If I send them a text message or an email, they will respond. And I'm catching up with Sasha next weekend, and I've been to Louise's house a few times for a coffee, and that's just kind of like a pinch me moment when somebody whose books you admire that much is somebody that you can send an email and say, hey, do you want to catch up sometime? And they'll probably say yes, rather than like, oh, crazy stalker, why do you have my email address? But yeah, it was just so generous of all three of them, and to all of the writers who gave quotes, because there are a few more on the Fremantle Press website. I think they took time out of their writing schedules, out of their busy lives, to read the book and to provide a meaningful statement to help my book find readers. The Natasha Lester quote is on the front cover, and it's so hard to be a debut writer in the current climate. People are a little bit more hesitant to spend money on an unknown quantity, and having Natasha's name on the cover with that quote, I think sometimes that's going to be the thing that gets me over the line. If somebody's looking for something like her books, but they've read all of her books and they see she's put a quote on there, it's just so unbelievably generous that she agreed to do that, and that Sasha and Louise agreed to do that. And I'm forever grateful, and I'm hoping that one day I'll get to do a cover quote for a writer and be part of a chain of women helping women.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I mean, and they are all very lovely people. I've only ever met Natasha, and she's just gorgeous. But isn't it wonderful that you're just part of this community where everybody
Yeah.
wants everyone to succeed? I love that.
Yeah.
Now, can
What's
you
the
tell us?
quote? It's everybody floats when the tide is high or something like that. I love that idea.
I love that too.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us what you're working on now? Because you mentioned it before.
I did, yeah. So, The Distance Between Dreams got published because it made it onto the 2023 Fogarty Literary Award shortlist, which is an unpublished manuscript competition run by Fremantle Press for WA writers between the ages of 18 and 35. But it wasn't the first time that I had entered the Fogarty Literary Award. I entered in 2020, I'm just checking the certificate, 2021. And I was highly commended for a manuscript called The Good Daughter. So I had, yes, been working on The Distance Between Dreams for 17 years, but I did occasionally put it down, give up on it, and work on something else. And one of those was a manuscript that started its life being called The Turning Tide, which is a story of a young woman who believes that it's her lot in life to look after her aging parents, because she's got to sort of the age of 21, 22. She's unmarried, she's not really got any prospects, and she's the dutiful daughter who never puts a foot out of line, whereas her younger sister is this kind of burgeoning suffragette firebrand type who likes to mouth off at church and tell people what she really thinks of them and get herself into trouble. And so, as much as they all love and indulge Amy, she's She's probably not going to be the one who agrees to stay home and look after the parents. She's also the beautiful one, my character Margaret believes, and everything changes when a new person moves into the house next door. He's an older man with maybe a dark, mysterious secret in his past, and he's just bought the local bookshop and he comes next door looking for someone to come and be his housekeeper, and he's decided Margaret is going to be the one. So that's what happens next. And it's all set against the backdrop of the tensions beginning in Europe as the First World War kicks off.
Oh, I love that. And I love that there's a bookshop in it.
Yeah,
I
I
love
mean, they had to be.
that. Sounds wonderful. I really, really looking forward to that. When do you think it might be finished?
I have finished a draft very recently, but I'm just going back through now and strengthening some of the themes. There's sort of it's kind of a love letter to early 20th century Australian literature as well. So because I do my research backwards, I've found out some things that I now need to go back and bring out some themes a bit more. And I also need to add a scene that resolves some of the tension between my main character and her mother, who's of a different generation and is worried about Margaret stepping out of line and what ruining her reputation might do to her chances at a secure future. So I just need to put one scene in to make that plot line feel complete. And then I'll be sending it out to publishers. And, how long is a piece of string? Who knows when people might see it if it ever gets published at all, but I've got everything crossed.
Well, I have everything crossed for you too, but after reading The Distance Between Dreams, I am sure that you will not have a problem, Emily Paul, because that book is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yes,
so nice to hear.
no, it is. It's beautiful. Well, that's time on our interview. Oh, they
Oh,
always,
wow.
I know they always go so quickly. Um,
Yeah.
Thank you for all coming along tonight and watching us live. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast, I do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think in the Reading by Candlelight Facebook group or on socials. And I'd like to thank our author Emily Paull for chatting with me and for being Reading by Candlelight's December historical fiction book box author.
Thanks so much, Fiona. And thank you to Molly for featuring me in the book box. That was absolutely delightful to get that little DM.
And if you haven't read this yet, you'll love the dual timeline, the tender love story that spans countries and time, and you'll enjoy the rich history behind the story and discovering the compelling family secret that links the family's lives and tears the young lovers apart. It's emotional, it's engaging, and it's wonderfully heartwarming, and it's a truly beautiful book for readers of Natasha Lester and Kate Morton. Now, wishing everybody a happy reading and goodbye until the next Reading by Candlelight Book Club.